I'm Jason Klamm, and this is the Comedy on Vinyl podcast. Everybody, welcome to the Comedy on Vinyl podcast. This week, we're not talking about one particular album. We're actually talking with somebody who's produced a number of albums we've already discussed, and some that we are planning to discuss. Welcome from the UK, Andre Jacquemin. I said I did it with the soft J. Let me try it again. Andre Jacquemin. Thank you for being here.
That's good. It's a pleasure.
So how far back does your history with Monty Python go? We'll start there.
It was around 1971-ish, something like that. So,
Okay.
so well over 40 years.
Let's see, because this is the problem with doing my research, is that if you look up comedy albums, you're in a lot of trouble trying to find who did what, and if there's a credit on there, you're not entirely sure what they were responsible for. Even if you know that they're the producer, you're kind of woefully misinformed, and it's a real problem for me, which is why I have their discography pulled up, and I can tell you what's on a lot of these records. But if I pull them, it might not have your name on it. It might not be might not be properly credited because there's an IMDb, but there's nothing good enough for audio production. But so you started out in a band. Let's go back that far. Let's go back to when you first started doing production.
Well, it was obviously a long time ago. I worked in a studio as a T-boy. I saw a little ad in a recording studio up in Wardour Street, which is in Soho, and I thought, wow, this will give me a chance to get my band recorded. And I applied for the job. I managed to get the job, and in fact, I had a great interview with a chap called Bob Court, who used to be quite a well-known skiffle guy in the 50s, who was now he was managing the studio at the time. And he said one thing to me, which was kind of really got my sort of interest in wanting to keep the job. And he said, look, we've had 5 people in 6 months here, and I suppose you'll not be any better than that. And that really kind of got to me, and I thought, right, well, I'll show him that I am better than that. And in fact, I tried really, really hard to absorb what was going on in the studio, make sure that all my duties were correct and that kind of stuff. So I managed to stay there, and I was under training under a guy called Alan Bailey, who just left Radio Luxembourg, and he took a bit of time to sort of show me the ropes, as it were, and I kind of listened and looked at what he was doing, and then when he went home, I started to replicate what he was doing during the day.
I suppose that's the perfect way to do it as somebody who's sort of apprenticing in that kind of work. And what's curious to me is the first thought I'm going to have as a lover of comedy is, while I might be able to sort of understand somebody who learns how to mix levels, somebody who learns how to make something sound perfect, what is your first exposure to actually making comedy or hearing or seeing comedy get made that gets you involved in doing audio comedy?
It was, going back to the Alan Bailey thing, was that I actually worked in a studio that was commercial stroke music. They did everything. So I learned about voice recording primarily initially.
Okay.
And then I developed into doing music, because obviously with my band and stuff, and we had a few music acts and doing jingles and that kind of stuff. So I got to learn the process about that, and I kind of enjoyed everything really. But the first thing I kind of went into was actually recording voice, and that kind of got me sort of interested into voice quality. So that was a good thing for me. It was a good kind of background, because voice really covers quite a wide range, as you can imagine. Especially when you're doing vocals and that kind of stuff.
That makes sense. Is there, when it comes to, is there one quality you can think of when something you think about much more when you're recording and mixing voice than with just music, where you've got so many different, you've got instruments and voice to deal with? I mean, is there something that I might not think of instinctively when you're cutting or mixing voice?
Well, no, they're pretty much the same. The interesting thing about sort of voices really is, and doing commercials, is that you have your 30-second slots, and you have to kind of get your dialogue in. You've got to get your verse, your chorus, all within 30 seconds. So I learned to be very efficient and document things, which was really, really important if you're doing quite a lot of takes on something. It's actually keeping a good management on that kind of stuff.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, if I'm looking, if I pull up the Monty Python discography, at least according to Discogs.com, so their first one is, of course, the one that was pulled, I think, almost exclusively just from episodes, just Monty Python's Flying Circus. That's that one. And then we've got another Monty Python, four albums? No, 3 albums, I guess, in the first, in 1970 alone, apparently, which kind of is crazy. And then we move on. If you said you started being involved in 1971, so do you know okay, so no, they did another release of previous record, several releases of previous record, so, and then previous cassette. Oh my goodness, there's so many different versions of just previous record that it's this list is incredibly long.
Let me take you. Let me take you back.
Yeah.
My kind of introduction to comedy was when I was growing up, and I would listen to Tony Hancock and the radio shows, and of course the Goons. They were kind of really quite special to me. So I kind of got interested in comedy at that early point. When I was at the studio, I was there probably about, I should think, about a year, or maybe about 8 or 9 months, somewhere around that time. And that's when I first met Michael Palin. And Michael came, I was just going out to lunch. I was dashing down the stairs, and then the door opens, and then this guy walks in and starts walking up the stairs. And I was looking after the reception during the lunch period. So I dash back upstairs, go behind the counter, and it's a bit like a Python sketch, really. And I said, "Oh, can I help you, sir?" And he said, "Oh, yeah, I want to do a demo tape for a friend of mine. You do voice recording here, don't you?" And I said, "Yes, certainly." So I looked in the diary, and Mike gave me a time, so I looked in the diary, and the other engineer, Alan, was busy that day, and this was the only time that Mike could make. So I booked him in with me, and we then started doing the voice tapes, and it must have taken about a year to do this tape, and I just thought, wow, this is kind of, why is it taking so long? But in between all of that, it gave me a good chance to edit the dialogue from his friend and add music and sound effects and that kind of stuff that you normally do for commercials. I didn't know at this time who Mike was. But at the end of it, Mike said to me, he said, "Andre, you've done such a fantastic job." He said, "Look, I'm putting an album together fairly soon. Would you be interested in helping out?" And I said, "Yeah, fine, okay. Let me know. You know where I am. You've got the phone number here. Just give me a call when you're ready." And then about 3 weeks later, I was offered a job in a Wild West show, a touring world touring Wild West show, and I was doing some stuff for them. And they said, "Oh, Andre, you're great. Can you come on the road with us and do our sound?" And I thought, wow, yeah, that sounds really exciting. But the same week, Mike rang up and said, "Look, we're having a meeting about this album that we want to do. Could you come along?" So he gave me the address and all of that. So I didn't give the other people, the Wild West show people, a call just to see what was going on. And I kind of wondered at the time, and I thought, well, what does anybody want to do a talking record for? Which is kind of a bit odd. But anyhow, I went down, and I went to Mike's house, and went in, and all the Pythons were there, apart from John Cleese. Anyway, the knock on the door, John Cleese walks in, and then the penny dropped as to who all these guys were, because I was so busy during the my kind of working life at the studio that I never really had time to watch television. So I was always fiddling about in the studio. And um, when John walked in, I thought, because everybody at the time whenever there was a sort of a Python show or whatever, it was always John Cleese that they had a picture of. So that's how I kind of knew who these guys were. And then I kind of said to myself, oh shit, I'm in big trouble here. I'm like 17 years old. Mike's asked me to come along to help on this project. And these are all Oxford and Cambridge guys, and for me, it was like, all I've got is a bicycle certificate and a 100-meter swimming certificate, and that was it. And I kind of felt a little bit out of my depth. Anyway, so I played along, and then Mike showed me this whole pile of scripts, which must have been about 2 foot high. And he said, well, look, that's what we need to record, Andre. Do you want to just have a look at that and just tell us, where, when, and what you want us to do? So that was kind of a big thing. Anyway, left it at that, and then I kind of went through all the stuff that we had to do and everything. And then I thought, well, this is obviously quite a major project, and I thought, if I'm going to do this, then I should get my friend Alan Bailey, who had taught me, but I knew I'd be in safe hands to make sure that everything run smoothly. And by this time, Alan had left to go back to Radio Luxembourg, and we booked in the first Python album to record in Radio Luxembourg, which is in Hertford Street in Mayfair, because they would do all the shows and the promos and stuff, and the band recordings was all done in Hertford Street. So that's kind of how that one happened, really. And there was always one kind of Python assigned to a particular project, and the first one happened to be Mike. So Mike and me basically put that together. Alan had recorded all the voices, and then I would take the stuff away. Alan would do a bit of work on it, put some effects in and stuff, and I would add a few more effects, and then we'd kind of like do a co-production on the stuff, and then we would just then play it back to all the Pythons and stuff, and then make sure that they're all happy with it. That's my first introduction to that, and I think that was Monty Python's previous album. It was called. That's the one with the long hand. Looks like a snake going around the cover.
There we go. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, and that's the one that apparently I clicked on it, and it just opened every possible version of that that's ever been released, which is why it was so. I was like, how is that physically possible? That's, oh my goodness! Like just the idea. Well, first of all, I'm now also I hadn't done the math at first. So you're more than a decade younger than these guys. You're 17 when you're starting on this, and but so busy and so good at what you do, I assume, like you say, you're so distracted that you didn't have time to watch TV, so you have no idea necessarily who these guys are.
Not an inkling, no, not at all.
That's so amazing. Like, and that's, and you couldn't have been the only one. However, it is. That might have helped you. I would imagine. I mean, did you go out? Did you watch the shows to get an idea of what their humor was like at that point? Or, I mean, it's not like you could just grab them. You had to watch them if they were on.
No, not at all. I didn't. No, I wasn't really interested, really. And as I said, I mean, I was quite surprised. And I always wondered when we were doing Mike Palin's Friends demo showreel. I kind of was always wondering, well, why is Mike always so busy, and he could only make certain dates. And of course, they were out filming the first TV series at the time, so he was unavailable quite a bit at that time. And it was something that kind of, I guess, helped in a way that I wasn't fazed by it. As I said, the only time I was fazed was when I realized who they were and how clever they were. But basically, when you're doing comedy, comedy's quite a serious business, really, and you have to actually kind of just do it for real, if you know what I mean. Do it seriously, But obviously, it's a lot of fun recording the stuff. But we did treat it quite seriously. And at the time, what had happened was that, and partly the reason they brought me in was that Terry Jones had done the first album, and they recorded it at an independent studio called the Marquee Studios, and that was a big job for Terry because obviously in between filming and everything, time was a bit limited. But Terry said that he thought the engineer was writing notes down about take marks and the best takes and stuff, and the engineer thought Terry was writing things down. So they ended up with about 70 quarter-inch reels of tape at the end, and Terry then had to go through the whole lot again. So they had this massive bill at the end of it for studio time, and it cost them an absolute fortune. Of course, I come along and, I have the scripts, I mark the take numbers down, what the best bits are, use this take for this line, use that take for that line, and I was pretty much more organized. And of course, that relieved the pressure because all the other guys realized what a big pressure that was. And I think they just realized that to have somebody who knows what they're doing at putting this stuff together was a great advantage. Plus, hence saving them a huge amount of money. I think for the previous album, I think I got £200. So what's that? What, $300 or something?
Oh my god! But the other thing too is that they're trusting in I'm not one to underestimate somebody just because of age, but to trust somebody that. I mean, they know at least Michael knew you from doing the demo for over a year, so he knows that you know what you're doing. But to trust you to also know what the best takes in terms of humor, that's a lot to lay on your shoulders or on your lap. Did you feel that, or you're just like, no, this is just part of my job?
No, I think I thought it was part of my job, and you know what's good and what's bad. You have to have a sort of certain common sense, which doesn't seem to be applicable these days, I think, with a lot of people. But no, it was just natural. It was very natural to me to find out what was funny and what wasn't funny. And invariably we would say, oh, use that take or use this take, or one of the boys would say, oh, that was a better take, can we use that? So I would intercut between my ideas and their ideas, and then we would kind of like get something which established a good performance.
Do you I guess if we start on let's talk about previous record a little. Are there any bits that stand out that you helped that you put together? Is there any, or do they kind of blend together for you?
Yeah, they all kind of blend together. I mean, it was a great album, and it was a good introduction to Python. I think that it just seemed to go very well, and I knew I was in safe hands with Alan Bailey anyway. So if anything was untoward or was going to be proved difficult, Alan was so seasoned at what he was doing, and he's such a brilliant engineer that I felt that we were terribly safe,
Did you let's see, this happens at least once an episode. My brain just decides to shut down because I've got so many questions to ask. Let's see. So if we're talking about previous record, I had some notes here. Let me see what I did with them.
While you're looking, I'll explain that during the cut of the previous album, we went to Apple Studios, the Beatles studio, and we were cutting the album. And then Mike, I was talking to a friend on the phone while we were waiting, and I said to my friend, I said, oh, it'd be great, should we just build our own studio and do our own stuff? Because he was in my band and everything. And his name's Dave Hellman, who is my kind of co-writer these days. And, always been, actually. And I was talking to him on the phone, and we decided that it would be great to have our own studio. Anyway, when I hung up, Mike said to me, he said, look, Andre, forgive me, but I couldn't mind overhearing you saying that you want to have your own studio. He said, look, come down for dinner one night, and I'd like to have a chat to you about it. So I went down to Mike's a couple of weeks later, and Mike said, look, I'd be interested in coming in with you. He said, what would you what do you need? And I said, well, I've been saving money up for quite some time with my band work, and to actually make sure that I can actually afford equipment, but I'm short of about £1,000 to get the final stuff. So he immediately got his checkbook out, gave me £1,000, and I said, "But Mike," I said, "you hardly know me. I mean, we've done your demo tape, we've done this album, but you're trusting me with £1,000. I can have a great Caribbean holiday with this." And he said, no, Andre. He said, "I trust you implicitly," he said. And he said, "Just use it well, and then just pay me back when you can." So I went away, and we set the studio up. My father had just finished a nice little greenhouse stroke garden shed in the garden. And then I said to him, "Is it possible I could build a recording studio in there?" And unbelievably, he said, "Yeah, okay, fine." And so that's how we ended up with the garden shed recording studio. And so I went out and bought all the equipment that we needed. And hence we did Machine Town Hanky in there, would you believe? Our first.
Goodness.
In a garden shed.
That's amazing. That is one of those that is not what I expected at all. I mean, the idea that that album, which by the way, like I've done this podcast for almost 5 years now, and I think it was our second live episode. Two particular guests happened to separately express an interest in talking about that album, and somehow it had escaped me. Much as I grew up with particular Monty Python albums, I'd grown up more on the shows and on the movies, so to have that one kind of exposed to me like so late in life, I was like, I have really missed out. And you would never guess again that, like I said, that it's a testament to your work and to their work, but that it was recorded in a garden shed. That is just that's a little mind blowing.
Yeah, it was a great time actually, and we had a fantastic time. And Terry Gilliam helped me out with that album, and he lived in West Hampstead at the time, and then he would come down and we'd work through it together, and it was fantastic, And no, we had a good time. And sometimes if I was out, he'd actually go. We had a side entrance, a little, very small, tiny walk-in alleyway next to our semi-detached house, and there was a big sort of wooden door there. So invariably he would climb over the door if it was locked. And I kind of think of it today and think, oh my God, Terry Gilliam climbing up my garden wall thing to get in, and it was quite bizarre really. But it was great. And, my mum would make them cakes and stuff. I think there's a reference on one of the albums about my mum's cakes and stuff. So she would bring cakes out for the boys, and it was fantastic. It was a really good time. But the advantage of that was that we had everything on tap. If you wanted to do Foley for sound effects, we had concrete floor just outside the door. We had a small garden pond for water effects. We had a garden gate, and you just stick a mic outside, and then you'd have everything. You had the whole world of sound effects right at your feet, which was fantastic. Really, I mean, there were great times. We had a good time there.
Wow, I'm sorry. Like, there's just so much to ask you about now. But the first thing I want to ask then is like, if we just go back to just starting out with them at all, is you got to pick the best takes, and what you said makes perfect sense. Yeah, common sense, at least, especially if you understand comedy, means you're going to know a good take when you hear one. But then when you're cutting, was some of the timing or a lot of the timing left up to you as well? Because that's a huge thing to just, as a comedian and as obsessive as I am, I wouldn't leave it in anybody else's hands. So the trust to have in somebody. So did you cut? I should just go back to my original question. Was a lot of the timing left up to you?
Yeah, pretty much so. I mean, it was built within in the reeds, of course. But sometimes I would nudge a bit earlier or a little bit later. And again, it was just common sense to have a comedy feel. I think all those years of listening to the Goons and Tony Hancock, you kind of got a good feel for comedy. So again, it was quite natural to me at the time to do that. But yeah, certainly timing is just it's a very complex thing to actually get right,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And this is one of those things where I think we've talked about a few different albums on the podcast. I've cut my own stuff. It was one of my dreams as a kid was to have my own comedy album, and so I made one when I was 19. It's not by no means nothing compared to what you did when you were 17, which is again what's again kind of blowing my mind. But like learning how to do that myself, I feel like you do have certain instincts, but then the idea that my first of all, I never had to physically cut tape. I've never had to physically cut tape, and I kind of actually do want to ask a little bit what it was like working on tape, and I'm assuming a lot of physical cutting.
Well, I've got a good story there, or a little interesting story. There was there was there was one word that because you'd work pretty quick, and then what was pretty shit was shit. So it basically ended up on the floor, and so invariably we'd have a pile of tape about 2 to 3 foot high in a pile just laying on the floor. And then Terry Gilliam said to me one day, he said, "No, I think I preferred that word that we had at on a particular sketch. I can't remember which one it was, but he said, I think we should put that word back." And I'm kind of like looking at this pile of tape on the floor, thinking, "Oh shit, we've got to now go through all that." I said, "Okay, fine. Well, give me a couple of hours and I'll find it." So Terry had a bit of a sleep at the time because we were working ridiculous hours. We were doing 12, 13, 14 hours a day. So I'd be just playing through, unraveling all this tape on the floor until I found the word. And in fact, I did find it fairly quickly, actually. And then thereafter, I'd made sure that anything that we took out of any Python recording was put onto. I joined it up and put it onto a reel, so we never, nothing ever ended up on the floor. It was always back. We'd always document the stuff, which is fine. But once we were going through it and we knew that it was rubbish, then it would be thrown away. But from then onwards, so fairly early on, I would keep absolutely everything. And as I said, I'd join it up and put it onto a separate reel so that we could find it a lot easier than raveling through, trodden on, and having to iron the tape to make sure it plays all right.
Yeah, that's the thing is like I take for granted that I got to work on digital first, and even when I went to film school, I got to cut actual film, but I never got to cut sound. So that's one of those things that you don't really get to talk about with many people. But my favorite thing about recording my own stuff and my own comedy is doing the sound effects. I like the job that I do, but I'm not. There are a few albums that stand out in my brain as albums that are just kind of, most of the Cheech and Chong albums actually, even though the content is not necessarily as, I guess, is sophisticated the word I'm looking for, I don't know, but it's not Monty Python, but the sound quality is gorgeous, and but then the other, there's Fire Sign Theater, there's The Credibility Gap, there's National Lampoon, but then, and this is in no particular order, but the Python albums they're just so dense with sound. They're so natural sounding, and just the idea of I know you were being colloquial, but just the idea of just sticking a microphone at the door and you had the sound you needed. I'm just wondering like what went into recording the sound effects, getting them just right, making them sound have the right atmosphere for the recording you were already doing.
No, I mean, again, it was a natural process that, if it sounds good, then let's use it. So that was a case of how we would do things. If we had a police car going by or something, we'd ram a microphone out very quickly, and or if we were waiting for a bit of a thunderstorm or whatever, you'd get prepared and then just get ready to record it once it starts. So I always prefer to try. To actually do our own effects if we can. But of course, there's so many great libraries these days that you have access to. And normally now for my movies and stuff, apart from the Foley stuff that I record, there's a billion sound effects to actually access as well to enhance what you're doing. But in those days, it wasn't so popular to have. I think it was just probably the BBC was one of the first really big sound effects libraries, and Terry Gilliam always used the BBC stuff to do his stuff for his animations.
I'm actually curious now that you say that, because when you say BBC and library, I immediately think of all the tapes they've tried to wipe out over the years and have succeeded in wiping out. And obviously, I mean, the story's pretty famous that Terry Gilliam bought up all the tapes so that Monty Python wouldn't be lost forever. Where are all the Monty Python? I don't need a specific geographical location, but where are all the Monty Python archives?
Well, I've got quite a lot here because we archived a lot onto CD and digital quite a while back now. But they're basically storage units all around for the shows or for the films, and they're in lockups. You know, they're in safe storage places.
Has there ever been an attempt to go back and look at these and find either outtakes or other things that maybe somebody's forgot is missing or hasn't been included on an album somehow?
Yeah, we've got. We on EMI released a special edition CDs, and we went back into the archives to pull stuff out from that, and I was amazed at the quality of recordings that we actually did, and they sound as pristine today as they are as they are when we first recorded them. Quite incredible, actually. The quality is just fantastic, and I even surprised myself. And you kind of think, "Oh God, did we do this?" You know, we're probably better than what we thought we were.
Have you? Actually, that's another thing too. Is are any of the newer things? I mean, I'm sure there have been some remastered issues, but so mostly what we're hearing is original tape then.
Yeah, pretty much so. Yeah.
That's one thing too. That's always kind of, I think. Recently, I had not recently. Well, 6 months to a year ago, I had a guest pick the soundtrack to the Holy Grail, which I had somehow missed, and I don't know how that's physically possible, because I think my assumption was, well, this will be the clips that I've heard in other albums. This will be the stuff that's from I've seen the movie. I had no idea that it was also a sketch album that was kind of going out of its way to make fun of the fact that they were doing an album of the soundtrack of their own movie.
Yeah, we kind of came up with the idea that we just didn't want to run the soundtrack, and with Python, they've always tried to give good value for money and content as well. And we just thought it was a funny thing to do, to actually put you into a location and then play along with it. I mean, I think that's kind of what that's one of my favorite albums, actually. I think that and Life of Brian are both very good albums to listen to, and they're full of kind of just interesting stuff.
Well, and it's one of those things. It's a testament to them and yourself. I actually don't mean to actually. If I'm going to talk about the audio Monty Python, I would include you in the group. It doesn't make sense otherwise, because if you're talking about you also have to include Neil Innes if you're talking about Monty Python music. So it doesn't make sense not to. But that's one of those things. Most artists are just going to let an album happen. If it's a soundtrack to a movie, they're just going to let it go. They're not going to put their own stamp on it. But it feels like there's this new sense of ownership. If you're like, no, we're going to take full control of something, even though we already made a movie. We're going to make an album that is its own thing, even though it might have clips from the movie. But it's all. One of my favorite things about it too is it has this sense of, they're kind of making fun of you for having bought the album, while at the same time, there's, it's a perfectly, beautifully put together sketch album.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And as I said, it's always down to giving good value for money. I think Pythons were always wanting to kind of like package their stuff really, really well. And obviously, when we had Match and Town Hanky with the triple side album on vinyl. Have you listened to the vinyl album of that?
I have. That was one of the things too, where they pointed out, you need to listen to this in a certain way. I think I had it digitally first, but then I had to buy it physically when they told me what was going on, and I was like, "This is fantastic." I can't imagine somebody beating their head against a wall when they didn't get the same thing the next time.
Yeah. Well, that idea was meant to be for Monty Python's previous album. In fact, and that's why you get a Now a Massage from the Swedish Prime Minister 3 times on one side on that particular album, because each one of those tracks was meant to start with a Now a Massage from the Prime Minister, unfortunately we got to about a dozen cuts of that, and the grooves ran into each other as it got to the center of the record. So in the end, we just cut the three things together and made one side of it. I've actually got the last attempted cut acetate still, bizarrely. I kept the last one actually, and it's somewhere in my archive stuff. And we then transferred the idea onto Matching Tie and Hanky. But it was an old kind of idea because in the kind of broadcast of dramas the BBC ran when they were running stuff off vinyl, they would go from outside to inside. You turn the album over and then go from inside to the outside, so the quality wouldn't change, because obviously quality changes as you go through an album because of the depths of the grooves. So we kind of just elaborated on that idea. So it was good. Yeah, it was quite a clever thing.
This is sort of a side thing, but with Matching Tie and Hanky, I have heard, and this could be apocryphal, that there was an issue of it with an actual tie and handkerchief in a box. Did that ever happen?
No, no, there wasn't actually. No, it was always meant to be the way it ended up to be. We discussed the around that time. We discussed about the exploding cover, which was we thought would be quite good. So what would happen is you take the record out, but you couldn't get it back into the sleeve because the spring would come out and burst through the cover. Unfortunately, it was going to be about 1 inch thick, and the shops wouldn't stock a 1 inch thick record at the time because it would take too much space up. So we just kind of aborted that idea. I just thought it was really funny because once you've actually got the record, you didn't know really what to do with it because you couldn't get it back into the sleeve. And we also had the other one where the needle would just drop off at the end, so you'd have to play it from the inside out, and then at the end you'd have to be there to catch the needle of the record player before it dropped them smashing onto the floor. I mean, we had lots of little ideas like that where we never got round to doing, you know.
Oh my goodness, you could do that now. I mean, at least with Record Store Day over here, do they have an equivalent of Record Store Day over there at all? I don't know.
No, no. You can. I mean, vinyl was very popular, so they're still doing vinyl.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too. Is like I'm appreciative for Record Store Day, but I will almost never go out and buy any of the records just because they're just too massively expensive, and they might release one comedy record a year. But it's the idea of the exploding cover. I feel like that's one of those things that's built for this resurgence of vinyl. Oh my god. Sorry.
No, go on. You carry on.
Well, I did want to. I was thinking about specifically, and I don't remember when I actually first. There are a number of sketches that I realized a while ago. I heard way before I saw because I didn't have the DVDs of the actual show, so I grew up with whatever was on TV, and so there are a number of sketches that had your fingerprints on them before I ever saw the visual. Like the Cheese Shop, that is probably my favorite audio sketch of all time, and I still don't know why. I don't know what it is about it, but I was wondering if you could talk about maybe that one specifically, but translating something that had already been on TV into an audio album.
Well, we a lot of the sketches on the albums were on TV, but we'd re-record everything. Nothing was taken off the TV recordings to put onto, certainly not the ones that I was involved in. We'd re-record absolutely everything, and in fact, I think they compared very well with the TV sketches. Yeah, Matching Tie and Hanky, that was very very funny. Dave Harman and me were doing our foot tapping kind of stuff in that, and it was a good fun album to do.
Oh my goodness! I mean, there's all these other things too. Like if I want to talk about that album, there's just that where the list of cheese just sort of trails off and trails off. The bouzouki music just pulls up, and then obviously the dancing, and then he screams, and then there's just this wonderful dead silence. And the music starts again, but very low. And there's just, oh my goodness, there's that kind of like, I'm just curious what kind of thought goes into it. I mean, there is what there was in the show, and you got to deal with what you have live. But you guys had time to tweak these sketches and make them maybe better than they were on the show.
Yeah, I kind of think that actually some of the stuff that does stand up in its own merit. Of course, we didn't have multi-track in those days. The most we had when we were doing all that early stuff was 4-track, so we'd have to keep sort of. I'd had about 4 separate quarter-inch machines running with sound effects and loops on. So you'd be running and pressing a button down, and then pressing another button down, pressing another button, and then you'd have to do live mixing with it as well. There was no automation like we have nowadays. So it was kind of a mammoth task to do this. But as you said before, you mentioned how rich the stuff sounds, and I think in a way it was just that the sheer effort that we put into actually doing this stuff was all worthwhile.
Boy, oh boy! And actually, you know, you made a comment that actually kind of makes me feel even better for my understanding of these albums, because I've talked to different people where we'll listen to and they're like, well, I think that might have been pulled off the show, and this might have been, and now it's nice to be able to tell them no, it's all been recreated, and I think that's another thing too, where that's another. Not just a production of it, but the fact that they put in a new performance of the sketch, that adds value to the album as well. It's another reason that you paid good money to buy the album.
Yeah, no, absolutely, yeah. No, everything was regenerated, yeah, absolutely. But you are at times you are hard to push to tell the difference between the TV and the recordings. But yep, absolutely, generally everything was re-recorded.
Is there I guess the one thing that you're not the one thing, but there are so many different things between recording, mixing, and producing music versus doing the same with comedy. But did you produce the musical numbers as well for the Python records?
Yeah. Yes, just about everything, I think. Certainly for the Contractual album, yeah, we did. That was all done. Life of Brian. Terry Gilliam had asked, said he was doing this animation title sequence, and he'd asked me if we could do some music for it. So again, Dave Howman and me, we came up with doing the Life of Brian song. So we wrote that, and Mike had written and Terry Jones had written the lyrics for it, and they wanted a sort of a Bond-esque feel to it. And I was working with a trumpet player at the time called John Dupre, so who obviously went on to, he's working with Eric quite a lot, and John was just a musical genius really, because he'd actually score stuff out, even in his head he could just write music notation out, brilliant. But at the time I got him to do all the brass stuff, and it was fantastic because it was a good opportunity, and we ended up writing the title music for Life of Brian, and Terry absolutely loved it. And in fact, we had to cut a whole verse out because he'd actually cut the animation down and a little bit. So we cut a verse out, and Terry said, "Oh, we've got to cut this verse out." And I said, "Yeah, but we at this time we were on 8-track." And I said, "Yeah, but we've only got this multi-track, this 1-inch 8-track." And he said, "Well, just cut it. Just cut the tape." I said, "But Terry, there's no other copy of it." He said, No. He said, "I trust you, Andre." He said, "You're good at what you do. Just cut it." And I went, "Be it on your own head, Terry." Anyway, so we cut this verse out. Thank God, and thank God it worked out okay, and it was seamless. So, in fact, there's a whole verse missing from that somewhere in the archive, and I can't even remember what lyrics they were on it. But anyway, so we ended up doing that. And then the same with Every Sperm is Sacred. Terry Jones had asked Dave Hammond and myself to actually do that, to write a track, and we put that one together, and that again was done on 8-track. I think we ended up with about 50 overdubs all on 8-track. We had to keep bouncing down to get all the instrumentation done. Yeah, it was all done on 8-track, quite phenomenal, really. But most of the Contractual album was all done on 8-track, yeah.
You've just named two of my favorite Monty Python songs, so I had absolutely no idea that your hands were so heavily involved in two of the most, again, two of the densest songs as well, in terms of just not just you're replicating a sound for comedy, but a musical sound for comedy, but it's also there's just so much. There's so many layers to it that you can tell, specifically for Every Sperm is Sacred, which has just got, there's so much going on there.
Yeah, totally, absolutely. We put basically we recorded the piano, bass, and drums was our first pass at it, so we had a sort of a basic guide for that. But again, doing it on 8-track, it was quite complex because we had to get the balances right at the time, as you can imagine, because we'd have to have all the other elements in and all the vocals, so we'd kept on bouncing down between the tracks to actually make that work. But it worked out okay, it was fine, and it was quite a fun number to actually do.
Did you work on any of the live albums?
Yes, I did. Yeah, Drury Lane. We had again. I used Alan Bailey. He was in the truck recording. We had the Rolling Stones mobile at the time, and Alan was in there. And then I was doing the live show. I was out front of house doing the sounds from that and firing on all the effects. Again, that's quite hair raising as well because. Everything was on tape, as you can imagine, and occasionally we'd have to the tape would split where the joins would come off. The sticky would just come off. So there you are. You're threading this tape through, playing this intro music and stuff, and just feeding it through with your hands. And then in between while the sketch was going on, you're quickly, busily rewinding the stuff off the floor again, and then actually joining it up, ready for the next cue to come in. It was quite manic.
Oh my God! The idea that we think that, and I'm not to discredit anybody nowadays who does live sound for anything, but that, like, there's no doubt that what you were doing was a performance. Like that is just that is. I don't like to use the word epic for anything, but it just the amount of stress I can feel just hearing that story is just like you deserve just all the applause and praise for pulling that together live. My God.
Yeah, no, yeah, because there's a lot of music intros and lots of sound effects to be played in. And again, you didn't have any samplers or anything in those days, and you had to do it all off tape. So it was quite an interesting time.
Because at the time, the only solid state thing you would have had would have been like a crappy synthesizer, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's right.
Well, actually, you know what? Have there been since sort of the digital revolution? There have been compilations, but can we talk about any sort of the latter day Python stuff that might have been put together?
Well, for the really. Apart from regenerating things on digital for re-releases, I think the live show, the O2 show that we did last year, 2014, was we'd have to record new tracks for that, and so that was all done digital. But principally, I think most of it it's all been on. Analog, really, off tape. I mean, I worked on the Elias autobiography, the Graham Chapman movie.
Yes.
Graham Chapman. Again, that was all digital, and the boys came in to work on that as well, and that worked out really very well. So that's probably the latest stuff that we were doing. I mean, I have suggested to Mike and to John actually. That it would be nice maybe to come in to do a new album. I mean, they like that medium because when you're doing filming or TV work, it takes so long. You have lighting, you have sound to deal with, you have cameras to deal with. With audio, they just come in, record their stuff, go away. I put it together, and then they come in, have a listen to it, and then it's all done. So it's very simple. I have spoken to them about perhaps doing some stuff. We'll just have to wait and see. Watch this space.
Well, that's one of those things too, where it's so funny. Is I know over the years, I think a lot of people, I discovered Monty Python and got interested in them in early sort of my early teens, and then eventually I get to my late teens, and there was that I don't know who originally produced it, but there was a I think it was called Life of Python, and
It's I think that was a BBC job. Yeah.
yeah, and that's right. Okay, so I don't remember who released it over here. They always confuse things by taking the original logos off. But yeah, it's great. People should watch that. Actually, it's fantastic. It's hosted by Eddie Izzard. It's fantastic. But it's great if you when you listen to them saying, "Well, I don't know if we'll ever get together." A bunch of old farts in wheelchairs, trying to do comedy. Which I think I wish I had gotten to see them performing again last year, because like they still pull it together. They're still making new creative stuff together. I love the idea that they're kind of rediscovering the fact, oh no, we will probably always work well together.
Yeah, totally. I mean, they get on very, they get on unbelievably well together. And I think until the O2 show, I don't think they really realised how successful they were. I mean, we did the George Harrison concert at the Albert Hall memorial concert, and we opened the second half with them, and it was. They were saying, "Oh, I hope I hope we go down well," because all the other acts were all musical, and they were the only comedy act that was on there. And I said to Mike, I said, "Oh, I shouldn't, don't worry. I mean, you're very well much loved and stuff." Anyway, it went down an absolute storm. And actually, there's an interesting thing. You're talking about digital, and I was doing their front of house sound for that, and I'd had some music cues to feed in. And what I did was, after the first half, we were opening the second half, and they were changing slightly the way we were going to do the intro. So I'd lined up my CD ready to play the music in, to fire it off for when Mike comes on stage. So I had all that lined up. We went back to the dressing room. Then we were rehearsing a couple of run-throughs on Look at Sit on My Face, because that's the number that they were going to be opening with. So that was good. And then we went. Then they said, "Oh, we're just changing the order slightly. You'll get an announcement now that the stage will be black, and then they'll walk on." So I then went back to the sound booth, and then it wasn't a booth; it was just in the theatre. And I kind of looked down at the CD player, and it said error on the CD. I went, "Oh shit!" I said, "What am I going to?" So I quickly thought, I'll put the spare CD in, because I always have a backup. And I thought, "Oh God, it's in the dressing room," which was about 2 minutes away. And then so I hit eject, and then the lights started to go down. And there I am holding the CD in my hand, looking at it, thinking, why is there an error on it? And this was the backing track for Sit on My Face. In my hand as the lights were going down. And then the announcement came in. So I put the CD back into the tray, and I just slammed the CD shut, and then hit play straight away. And perfect. I tell you, God must have been with us on that particular day, because right on cue, the lights went on, and then the track started perfectly on cue. God, I tell you, and after that, my hand was like shaking, like you wouldn't believe. And I actually had to have my other hand holding my hand over the pause and play button to do all the other music cues, to make sure that nothing was going to go wrong. So things can go wrong even on digital. It was good. Anyway, after we did our little set and stuff, we were walking back. I went backstage, and we were walking back to the dressing room. Mike said to me, he said, "Andre," said, "your cueing was impeccable." And I said, "You should have been out there, Mike, because you don't know what the hell was going on." I said, "It was frightening, absolutely frightening. It was just like this horrendous story." And even to this day, I kind of think, oh my God, supposing the lights come on, they're ready to sing, and there was no backing track to play them. It would have been so embarrassing, But anyway, so things can go wrong with digital.
Oh my God. I also like too that you are the go-to guy. You put the music together. You're also, well, he's the guy who really ought to be timing us on the stage with the music, and I mean, it must be good to be used to having them trust you, but like it's fantastic to know that besides the core guys, that there's always been this other guy out after that first album, that first fully produced album, this one person who's been pulling these together. Have you worked on any of the side projects like Rutland Weekend Television or the Ruddles or anything like that?
Yeah. Initially, I was helping out with Rutland Weekend, and we did some radio for BBC Radio 5 stuff. We did that. Mike's Ripping Yarns, I'd worked on 3 of those, actually. We did sort of incidental music and things for Mike on that one. And Holy Grail was re-released because initially Holy Grail was only out in mono, so we re-digitized that. And I ended up with 3 optical tracks, which was a dialogue, which was mono, music that was mono, and sound effects that was mono. And so we had to do it in surround sound. So I had to kind of like rip the whole lot apart, reorganize, get all the music again, what I could find, and then and redub the whole thing. So yeah, I do work on other side projects that they do. Yeah, not absolutely everything. I think their process is that they want me to remain competitive, really, and top of my game.
Are there other comedy projects that you've worked on that I might be familiar with? Even if I haven't, I'm just curious as to the other comedy stuff you've done, because I know you do a lot of music, but obviously I'm so interested in the comedy you do.
Yeah, Barry Humphries. I did. I can't remember what album that was called. It was a Barry Humphries album. I did, and that was fun. I actually did that at home. Actually, it was a live concert that he did in London. Was it the Apollo or one of those? Barry Humphries live. So I think that was one of his first albums. So I did that, and what else was there? There's a few sort of comedy people that I have worked with over the years. Yeah, quite a few. I can't remember them all at the moment. I have to have a look at my archive to see what I've come up with. But yeah, I have worked with quite a lot of the comedy people. Yeah.
Is there? Because what we normally do at the end of an episode, obviously, normally, I sit and usually I'm the one jabbering on for half an hour to an hour about, an album that the guest likes, and I'm interrupting them. But occasionally somebody like you will come on and you'll be telling me stories that I finally shut up. But is there an album? Is there one Python album that you go back to, or maybe that you've even re-listened to yourself and like to re-listen to, or one that you point to as, well, this is the one to listen to if you want to start listening to good audio comedy by Monty Python?
I think you'll have to wait for the next new Python album if we ever do one. But, is there one? No, I think we spoke about it earlier, and I think the Holy Grail or the Life of Brian soundtrack albums, I just think they're just really hilarious. If you listen to them, as they have a bit of kind of like, I don't know, there's some sort of attraction listening to a soundtrack album that isn't quite a soundtrack album, isn't there? I think there's something quite good. I think that will give you a good introduction to listen to the other stuff,
I think that's perfect, actually, because it's one of those things where you feel like you're familiar with something, especially Holy Grail. Over here, I feel like that's the thing people get introduced to first, because PBS, they might still play the shows, but you can get the shows online if you want to. You should pay for them, people, by the way, if you're going to watch them. But, I think people are exposed to the movie first, and this assumption that you're going to be familiar with all the stuff on the album is great, because it's immediately shut down. And,
No, I completely agree. I think certainly a good starting point for people for that. Yeah.
Well, I thank you so much for doing this, and I would absolutely love to have you on again. And frankly, I hope the next time I'm in London to interview you. Is there anything that you would like to plug or promote?
No, I don't think so. No, no, no. I could do with some lottery numbers. That would be quite good. Good idea of that. But no, no. I think all right. I'm working on a comic strip episode at the moment. We're doing that, which was quite, or is quite a lot of fun.
Oh, that's amazing. Have you worked with them for a while?
I have, yeah. I've done quite a few things with Peter Richardson for that. Yeah, yeah. He's a bit of a genius himself. In fact, I think Peter's a bit like all the Pythons all put into one person. So that's how complex he is to work with.
Were you in any way involved in Bad News? And I only ask because we talked about that the other day.
Yeah, no, I wasn't.
I mean, I know that was mostly Brian May, but I thought I'd ask just because somebody just exposed me to it, and I was kind of upset that I'd never heard of it. That's why I like this show, you know.
Yeah.
Well, they can go to redwoodstudios.co.uk to look up more about your studio, correct?
Yep, absolutely. Mike Palin and I were still partners, so we're not sexual partners, just business partners. We have a humble little studio up in Soho, we have a lot of fun. I'm actually seeing quite a bit of Mike at the moment because we're doing. He's doing a little animation series called The Clangers, which I believe William Shatner is doing the voice in the States for it, and for the UK version, Mike's doing that over here. So I'm seeing quite a lot of Mike at the moment.
Wow. The idea of Michael playing the same part that William Shatner's playing is really funny to me.
It is. It's fantastic, but a good combination.
Well, Andre, thank you so much for doing this.
It's no problem at all. Good luck with it, and I hope we didn't bore people too much.
No. Are you kidding? The amount of times that that you would have seen me biting my own fist as to how excited I was to this new information was it's innumerable. But thank you guys for listening as well, and as always, have a good thing. Vinyl is a production of Stolen Dress Entertainment. It is produced by Mike Warden and is hosted and edited by Jason Klamm. Our theme song was composed and performed by Richard Levinson. Please visit stolendress.com to listen to our other podcasts, read our blogs, read our tweets, watch our videos, and read our books. Please subscribe on iTunes, and if you like us, give us a 5-star rating and a nice review. You can find us on facebook.com/comedyonvinyl, Twitter @comedyonvinyl, and find everything else at comedyonvinyl.com.